What's up, guys? Nate Christian coming to you guys again. Super excited to be talking about this next prospect. Last week, we talked about Brees Hall and what he was looking like. This week, we're talking about a guy that came into the 2021 college football season as the 1A and 1B with Brees Hall, and that is Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M, running back. He is 6'1", 225 pounds. Funny enough, he's actually the same size as Brees Hall, who we talked about last week. Like I said, 1A, 1B, very similar prospects in some regards, definitely the same size. But let's kind of get into it because you're going to notice that he is a different prospect than Brees Hall. There's some different traits that they have that they're better at. And by the end, you'll figure out, do you like Brees Hall more or do you like Isaiah Spiller more? It's a good question. A lot of people are asking themselves that question right now. But going forward, let's look at his college production to start off. Like Brees Hall, because these guys are going to be compared plenty. So I'm going to talk about them together in this video. Like Brees Hall, successful and productive as a true freshman. He had over 1,000 scrimmage yards as a true freshman, 10 touchdowns, just under 1,000 yards on the ground, but he made up for it with about 200 yards in the receiving game on about 25 receptions. Great impact as a true freshman, especially in the SEC at Texas A&M. Love that for him. But as we look at the future after that, the 2 seasons after that, his sophomore and junior year, he continued to have over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, but only about 1,200 yards each season. Didn't really make a jump any season to be an elite running back in the SEC in college football. Very solid, very productive, but never really improved beyond his true freshman season. Looks very solid, but the touchdowns went down every year. The receptions never really went up. The yards per carry stayed the same. I mean, his spread over the 3 years is a 5.4, 5.5, and a 5.6 yards per carry. So he never really improved in that department. And in this last season, we saw his backfield partner, Devin Achaney, actually, match his production basically. Looked almost as good as Isaiah Spiller. Not really too much difference there. So he was unable to really take that lead role once Devin Achaney got there. And we kind of want to see more as an elite prospect. But, when you look at it, at the end of the day, those are good numbers. Nothing to really complain about from a prospect profile. But he's maybe just not an elite running back like we've seen before, like the Jonathan Taylors, the DeAndre Swifts, the J.K. Dobbins. Now, let's get into some of his strengths because he's got plenty of those. Now, like I said, 6'1", 225 pounds, much like Brees Hall. Pro-ready size. I love this for Isaiah Spiller. He seems to carry it a bit lighter than Brees Hall. But so I want to see how he comes in the NFL Combine. If he's really 225, maybe he's more like 215. But nonetheless, at that size, he's got the NFL workhorse capability. He's a guy that I think that, could handle a high volume role. We'll see if he gets that at the next level. Now, the thing that he does best, because we're going to get into one of his weaknesses that I think, really epitomizes Isaiah Spiller as a prospect, is that he doesn't do anything elite. But the thing he does best is definitely his upside in the receiving game. He's able to make plays down the field. He can run down the field. He runs a good route tree. He's lined up inside, outside, as well as, the consistency from the backfield and checkdowns and option routes. But he can line up anywhere. He can run most routes you're going to want from a running back, and he can make the contested catches, especially with his size. He's a physical player at the catch point. So Isaiah Spiller receiving upside, definitely a strength for him. It's probably going to be what gets him his draft capital, because at worst, you're going to have a great receiving back at the next level, very easily a 1B in a committee. This is a guy that, is going to have the PPR upside in most leagues. Something else that he does well is the contact balance. He keeps moving, keeps turning those feet, and he can step out or shrug off most tackles in the secondary level. He's not a big bruiser like a Derrick Henry where he's going to just be trucking people, stiff-arming people, but he's got the size, he's got enough power to make an impact and be hard to tackle at the next level. Not going to be too worried about that. He does not go down easily. Now, as I said, he doesn't really do anything elite. He's a do-it-all running back. He can do everything at a good enough level that he's one of the top prospects in this draft class for the RB position. But what keeps him from being my number one and even my number two is that he doesn't do anything elite. Like I said, his receiving upside is good. It could be great, but athletically, nothing that I'm going to get super excited about. He's not going to go out there and run a 4.3. I'd be a little surprised if he runs a low 4.4. I think he's probably going to be a high 4.4, 4.5 kind of guy, which is, obviously we're talking about some of the best athletes on the planet. But when you're in the NFL, if you want to be one of the best, you literally have to be one of the best on the planet. And I don't think Isaiah Spiller is quite there athletically. Something else, I'm going to comp him a little bit to Joe Mixon, with that receiving upside, with that size. And at least for me, Joe Mixon is a volume play. And I think Isaiah Spiller is going to be kind of similar. I don't think he's someone who constantly creates his own yards. I think he's going to have to rely on volume at the next level to really be productive in fantasy. Now, if he doesn't have the volume, I think he can still be a great flex play, maybe an RB2 at times. But if he wants to ever reach those upper levels of the fantasy football asset dynasty value, he's going to need volume, because he's not the kind of guy that's going to create a lot of yards after contact, get around players, get the big touchdown runs, the home run runs. We're just not going to see that from him consistently, like some of the other guys who are at the top of the league. And then one last thing that kind of stops me from thinking that he's going to be a top fantasy upset is something we saw with his college production. We saw the rushing touchdowns go down every year. And what I noticed on the tape is that he's not a patient runner along the goal line. Now, this is a easy weakness to point out because it's a weakness for most running backs. But, like I keep saying, if we're going to look for the elite prospects, we want a guy who's going to be good around the goal line, be able to get those touchdowns. Touchdowns can really swing a fantasy football matchup, as we all know, especially for running backs. So, along the goal line, he just seems to run right where the play is going. He's not going to take a second and move around, try to find that goal line. He's just going to go head first, steam going. And this is really what, for me, made Najee Harris such a good prospect, is that around the goal line, he had a nose for the end zone. And that's something we also see with Breece Hall. I mean, just consistently getting those rushing touchdowns. One of my bigger questions with Isaiah Spiller is he going to be able to handle that goal line work, or is he going to get vultured? So that could definitely limit his fantasy upside. But don't get me wrong, Isaiah Spiller, top 3 running back in this draft class. I have a pretty good grade on him. I think he's going to end up in the second round somewhere. But before we really dive into what his contract's going to look like for that second round draft capital, at the NFL Combine before the NFL draft, many people are going to be looking for Isaiah Spiller's 40-yard dash time. I'm not worried about his 40-yard dash time. I already mentioned it. It's going to be a little bit slower than like your speedsters out there, but it's going to be fine. I'm more worried about his shuttle and his 3-cone drill. I want to see that Isaiah Spiller can stop and start. One of my biggest questions with his athleticism is, can he do that stop-start behind the line of scrimmage in the open field at the second level? Is he elusive? Is he going to be able to, do that cutback that we need to see? I want to see great numbers there. If I see that, his athleticism will be plenty fine for me. I'm not going to worry about it as long as those numbers look good. So as long as he passes all those check marks, he's going to get that second round draft capital. I could see him getting a slightly similar contract to Javonte Williams, who signed a 4-year deal, averaging about $2.2 million a year. Javonte got selected pretty high up in the second round. I don't think Isaiah Spiller goes quite that high. I think he's more of a mid-second round pick, but he's probably going to be looking at about $2 million per year. Now, who's got picks in the middle of the second round? You could use a player like Isaiah Spiller. I got 2 teams for you. One of them is that's a team I talked about last week for Breece Hall, and that is the Atlanta Falcons. They are obviously looking for a lead running back. Arthur Smith there, he was working with Derrick Henry in Tennessee. And as much as we love the Cordero Patterson experiment this year, I don't think that's a long-term fix there. And Mike Davis, we know. So Isaiah Spiller can go there. Like I said, he can handle the large workload. He offers the receiving upside. Like, he could be used in a somewhat similar role as the Cordero Patterson if Arthur Smith really wants that receiving game to be affected by the running back. So he kind of offers everything that the Falcons could be looking for. And, they have the 43rd pick. So that's about the 11th pick in the second round. I think that's a pretty good spot for Isaiah Spiller to go. A little bit later in the second round, though, with the 55th pick, got the Arizona Cardinals. And we just saw them go out of the playoffs. Didn't look too great. They have a lot of free agents coming up in this free agent class. AJ Green, Kirk, both of the running backs, Chase Edmonds and James Conner. So that offense could look completely different next year. DeAndre Hopkins will be a year older. But Isaiah Spiller could easily come in and fulfill that role as the lead back. Second round draft capital, get yourself a running back that can offer that receiving upside that they're going to need in that offense, but also be able to run up the middle, run between the tackles. I think Isaiah Spiller would fit this offense very well. And while they did not overlap, Cliff Kingsbury was the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M for a couple of years. So he might be able to, look at his connections, talk to some people, network, and, get the inside scoop on what Isaiah Spiller is as a prospect, as a player. So don't rule out the Arizona Cardinals as a landing spot for Isaiah Spiller. And for me, that's all I got this week. A nice 10-minute rundown on Isaiah Spiller, who is currently my RB3 in this draft class. Tune in next week to see who my RB2 is. You already know it. Breece Hall is my RB1. You probably can guess who my RB2 is once you've counted those two guys out. So that's all from me. You can follow me at Nate NFL on Twitter. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel, and also follow Dynasty Owner on Twitter. If you want to see more of my work, it's over the Dynasty Rewind. We have a Patreon over there. $1 for the group chat, $5 for the Patreon. But make sure you sign up for all your friends to get in Dynasty Owner Leagues, because this platform is the best, and you will never have to strategize and build your team for Dynasty as you do in Dynasty Owner. And it's the greatest challenge. And these running backs on rookie contracts, that's the way to win a championship. So until next time,